Have you ever wondered if GTA 5's airport is a faithful representation of real life? How accurate is the replica that Rockstar Games created of one of the busiest airports in the world, the Los Angeles International Airport, which in the game goes by the name of Los Santos International Airport? With the help of our friend George, we're going to take a closer look at the airport's runways. We'll break down what those numbers on the runways actually mean and check if this entire airport was designed based on real life. We'll also take a look at how the aircraft behave. So is all this airport infrastructure really that accurate? Are they really portrayed the way they are in real life? Does all of this actually make sense in practice? Stick with me until the end because I'm sure you're going to discover a lot of things you didn't even know about GTA 5 and aviation. Los Angeles International Airport is known for its famous U-shaped layout, which is faithfully represented in GTA 5. At the front we have two levels, one for departures and another for arrivals. It's a very common design in modern airports, and it's pretty close to real life. We also see entrances marked with airline signs, pedestrians waiting with their luggage, and taxi areas ready to pick up passengers. Everything quite consistent with reality, at least so far. As everyone knows, we can't actually go inside the airport in GTA 5 like we can in games such as GTA Vice City. So that brings us to the airport's main runway, where I'm gonna walk you through every detail of this place. Basically, this airport operates with two types of aircraft, the larger plane called the jet in the game and the good old Shamal, a well-known aircraft throughout the franchise that's just a commercial jet. The airport also has 3 runways, and there are a few interesting details we'll go over in this video. On both the main and secondary runways, we can often see planes landing and taking off. The jet I mentioned earlier looks like a mix between the 747-400 and the 747-8II because of that hump on the upper deck that extends toward the middle of the fuselage. It always lands on the right runway and always takes off from the left, following the exact same route every time. The runway where the plane lands has a pre-programmed sequence. The aircraft lands, taxis all the way to the end of the runway, and parks inside a hangar that's way too small for this type of plane. It stays there until it simply disappears, either when you move far enough away or when you turn the camera in the opposite direction. As we can see in the game's code, this whole sequence starts here and goes all the way to the end of the runway. It's honestly pretty bizarre that this aircraft just stays parked here forever, stuck in this endless loop of landing and stopping in front of the hangar. And if there were passengers inside, it'd be even worse because there's no way for them to get off. There aren't any marked passenger gates on the ground, just some vehicle traffic around. A bus could technically show up, but that's definitely not the standard for an airport of this size. Rockstar basically just placed the plane there to take off in a kind of scripted way, really just to fill the scene. Another issue I noticed is that since the whole thing is pre-programmed, aircraft always end up landing on the same runway in the exact same way. But in real life, pilots usually land against the wind, which changes which runway heading they use. However, not everything is unrealistic. For those with sharp eyes and some aviation knowledge, you can actually spot this little cart with nitrogen tanks, which are used to inflate airplane tires. Yes, aircraft tires in real life are filled with nitrogen for several reasons: lower pressure variation with temperature, less moisture, reduced pressure loss, and a few other factors. Obviously, for regular vehicles like our cars, compressed air is more than enough. So here's a positive point for Rockstar. They actually included a nitrogen cart, which is realistic. It really looks like someone is doing maintenance on the aircraft. But just as Rockstar paid attention to adding a specific cart, it also seems like they placed those tanks there mostly just to fill the scene, because at an airport the size of Los Angeles, all the fuel actually comes through underground pipelines. Only one pump truck is needed to transfer it from those pipelines into the aircraft's wings, so it's unlikely we'd see something like that in a major airport. Now this machine here is also pretty realistic. It's called a cargo lift, and it's a very common vehicle for aircraft of this size since it's used to move cargo up or down between the ground and the plane's height. Once again, credit to Rockstar. The only problem is that it's just a static asset. It's always parked there, and we never actually see airport workers using it. And I know you're enjoying uncovering all the details of GTA 5's airport, but I need to ask you, please consider subscribing and dropping a like on the channel. It helps us out a lot, and the majority of people who watch here don't even subscribe, so give us a hand with that. Speaking of workers, we do often see employees driving around the airport, but they don't do much more than operate some of the typical vehicles you'd expect there, along with a few pre-programmed actions. And speaking of people around the airport, some pedestrians aren't even wearing the safety vests required in this restricted area. This is where aircraft are being operated, so everyone there should be identified and equipped with proper PPE. Even if someone says those pedestrians are supposed to be passengers, they still wouldn't be allowed there without marking. Passengers must stay in a designated pedestrian zones, like in small airports that don't have jet bridges. For pedestrians to be there, there should at least be a marked path for them to follow. So far we've seen a mix of realistic and not so realistic details, but here's where things start to get interesting, and also where they start to get a bit tricky for Rockstar. Some serious problems appear when we look at the path aircraft take from the gate to the runway. The first issue, during taxiing, there are several parts of the airport that just don't make sense. For example, this protective barrier sitting right in the middle of the taxiway. It shouldn't be there. This airport definitely wouldn't be able to handle aircraft the size of a 747 because the taxiways are way too narrow for the type of planes we often see landing. The only aircraft that seem to move around without issue are the smaller jets, simply because of their scale. Trying to taxi a 747, or in this case, the jet, only results in the engines clipping against airport signs. When the pilot approaches the runway, there's a spot called the hold point. Here, pilots need clearance from the control tower before crossing into a critical zone between the taxiway and the runway. The runway itself is what's used for takeoffs and landings. The problem is that some developer actually flipped the markings. Let me explain why that's wrong. As you can see, the dashed line is placed on the taxiway side, and the solid line is placed on the runway side. But in reality, it's the opposite. The runway side should have the dashed line, and the taxiway side should have the solid one. So Rockstar did think about the detail, but ended up placing it backward. It's somewhat realistic, but the order is completely wrong. Now, talking about the runway itself, there are more issues. At first glance, for someone who isn't familiar, it might look fine, but in reality, there are multiple problems. The first one is the terrible asphalt condition. Seriously, it looks completely worn out, full of cracks, holes, and random markings from the engineering team. An airport of this size should definitely be able to maintain much better runways. In real life, especially at an airport like LAX, the runways are kept in excellent condition, smooth as a carpet, because pilots are landing aircraft worth millions of dollars. The runways have to be pristine. Moving on, let's talk about the numbers painted on the runway. Here, we basically have two parallel runways. They're differentiated by a letter after the number. The left one is 33L for left, and the right one is 33R for right. Now, if you've ever wondered what those runway numbers mean, I'll try to explain. They indicate the runway's orientation relative to magnetic north. For example, let's look at Trevor's airstrip. Imagine the compass north is always pointing to the left of your screen, just for the sake of this example. When an aircraft approaches from the south, magnetic north is 360 degrees, so the southern end of the runway would be number 36. If the aircraft approaches from the opposite side, the numbering is reversed. That would make it the northern end of the runway, opposite to the previous heading. Now, I spent hours trying to figure out how to confirm this in the game, since GTA only shows a fixed north on the map. At first I thought it was impossible to check the numbers, but then I remembered some GTA vehicles actually have working indicators on their dashboards. So I thought, if it works for cars, maybe it would also work for helicopters or other aircraft. That's when I found a fully functional compass inside the helicopter. With it, I calculated what the runway numbers in GTA should actually be, and to my surprise, they're wrong. According to the game's compass, the two parallel runways facing north should be numbered 21 and its opposite 03. The auxiliary runway should be 30 and 12 instead of 21 and 13. During the analysis, it looked like the developers knew how to number the runways, but they almost inverted them. It's like someone called the dev away for a coffee break, and when he came back, he just flipped the numbers because they do look similar. And speaking of numbers, the ones Rockstar originally placed add up to 69. That could just be a coincidence, or maybe it was intentional, because we all know Rockstar loves that kind of joke. So it's possible they purposely used the wrong runway numbers just to sneak in the 69 gag. Now, let's look at runway lighting. We'll see how this airport looks at night, check if the lighting makes sense, and whether the developers really thought it through. Looking at the runway threshold, you can already spot issues. The red lights simply aren't there, and the green light should be at the start of the runway, not where it is now. It looks like a developer really messed things up with the lights, but the lighting along the rest of the runway seems correct. According to FAA standards, taxiway lights should be blue at the edges, marking where they end. But as we can see, a developer literally forgot a blue light and left it right in the middle of the runway. Watching a landing more closely, you'll notice the bot controlling the aircraft deploys the landing gear way too close to touchdown. In a real operation, the landing gear would have been lowered much earlier, not seconds before hitting the ground, because if something went wrong and the gear didn't deploy, doing it that late could be too late to fix the problem. Of course, there are emergency systems to force the landing gear down manually, but again, the airport doesn't really look prepared for this type of aircraft. The runway seems to be about 1 to 1.5 kilometers long, which makes the entire airport feel out of scale. To be fair, we can give Rockstar some leeway here, since airplane physics in the game are completely different from real life. It's much easier to stop a plane in GTA than in reality. But when it comes to the aircraft scale, Rockstar made the jet way too big, so realistically, it couldn't even operate at this airport. Outside the airport, there are also some cool details. Cops patrolling, for example, you can find plane spotters, people standing outside the airport watching aircraft land and take off. Not many players noticed that, but some developer cared enough to put an NPC there with binoculars watching the planes. That kind of attention to detail is what makes Rockstar so impressive. So, another positive point for them. Now let's head into the skies of Los Santos and see how things work behind the scenes. Looking at the game's code, we can spot the paths where aircraft frequently spawn in the sky. And near the airport, you can see the lines planes follow, simulating a sort of standby pattern while waiting for the runway to clear. Yes, it is actually possible to see this in-game on rare occasions. Airplanes waiting their turn to land at the airport. While making this video, I found several other problems with the airport, but honestly, there just wasn't enough time to cover everything here. So if you enjoyed this and want a part 2, let me know in the comments. And if there's another part of the game you'd like me to analyze for realism, drop it in the comments as well, and I'll check it out. If you like this kind of video and want more, I suggest you check out 2 videos that did really well here. In the first one, I talk about the realism of lawmen in Red Dead Redemption 2, and in the second, I break down how electricity works in the game. If you have any ideas on what I should analyze next, or if there's something you know a lot about, drop it in the comments. I read and reply to every single one. Well guys, that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. A big thanks to everyone new here. Thanks for support us.